Hey, this video is going to be how to set up pfSense 2.5.0 with OpenVPN for client VPN using JumpCloud's LDAP as a service for authentication. Um, this is starting off with a diagram of my lab network just to show you, give you an idea of what I'm working with here. Main thing I want to draw your attention to is that I have two routers. One of them is going to be acting as my ISP, so we'll say that the LAN networks on this ISP router are actually acting as WAN IP addresses, so wide area network there. So we'll have a client machine that's sitting on one WAN IP. That's where we're going to be installing OpenVPN client. And then on the other WAN, the 10.10.1.0 network, that's where our pfSense router is going to be living. That's the one that we're going to be configuring during this video. And then that pfSense box has a LAN created on it that's a 192.168.33 network, and a client attached back there. So we'll be creating OpenVPN and installing certificates on this pfSense box here. We do have the availability to get out to the actual internet. That's what this red line is here. It's going to communicate with JumpCloud's LDAP when we say, hey, router, let me in. I want to communicate with a network here. It's going to say authenticate with JumpCloud. JumpCloud's going to say good, and it will allow you to access this network behind the firewall here. So pfSense box. Let's go ahead and start by importing some certificates. So we'll do that by going to System Cert Manager, and we're going to be importing three certificate authorities from JumpCloud. We'll be creating an OpenVPN certificate authority, and then for certificates, we'll be importing one from JumpCloud and creating and signing one for OpenVPN. So we'll start off on CAs. We'll go to Add. We'll give it a descriptive name, JC1 for this demo. We're going to have three of these, so however you want to name them, just keep that in mind. You will want to be able to tell them apart for later on when we create. We'll see when we get there. So for the method, we do want to change that to import an existing certificate authority. We want to add that to the trust store and randomize the serial. So now we need to get the certificate data. That's where we're going to head over to JumpCloud's documentation, JumpCloud LDAP SSL certificate. So they give us two commands that we're going to eventually run, but the first one is what we want here, that outputs the certificate authority to a file in our temp directory. So go ahead and copy that. Head to our command line. That's my RDP session. We'll want a command line. Clear that out. We'll paste our command, and that's going to save it to temp jumpcloud.chain.pem. So let's go ahead and read that out. jumpcloud.chain.pem. First thing that you'll notice is that there's a lot of information, and you'll see four certificates that it has saved in that file. So we want to skip over this first certificate and just go down and import the next three, which we will have to do individually. So copy from begin to end. Head back to pfSense. And that didn't copy, so let's try and copy that. Okay, great. So we have that in our certificate data. We'll save. Perfect. Let's do the same thing for the next two. JC2, import, trust, randomize. Let's go get that certificate. Copy, paste, save. And one more. JumpCloud 3, add, randomize. Okay, paste that here and save. While we have the documentation open, let's go ahead and jump over to our JumpCloud LDAP server certificate. So we'll need to run another command for that. Go ahead and copy it. Just clear the shell, make it a little bit easier to see. Run it. This time it's going to save to temp JumpCloud LDAP.pem. So let's read that out. temp JumpCloud.LDAP.pem. There's only one certificate, so go ahead and grab that. Copy it. Head back to pfSense. Certificates. Add sign. Import an existing certificate. Descriptive name, JumpCloud server cert. Leave x.509 checked. Paste that certificate in certificate data. Don't worry about the private key. That's where I got hung up for a little bit. You don't actually need a private key here, so we're going to just save. That'll work fine. So now we're done with that particular document from JumpCloud, but we do need to create a OpenVPN CA and then create and sign a certificate using that CA. So we'll add descriptive name, OVPN CA is what I'll call mine. I'm going to leave create an internal certificate authority. I am not going to check trust store or randomize for this particular CA. And then for key type, algorithm, lifetime, common name, you can change those based on your liking. For the demo, I'm just going to leave everything default. You can make them weaker, stronger, etc. The only things that I will change: country code, state, city, org. So I'm in the U.S., New York, Rochester, and we'll just call this organization test. We'll save that. We'll move on to creating our OpenVPN certificate. So click the Certificates tab, add sign, create an internal certificate. Great. Descriptive name, OVPN server cert. That's what I'll call mine. Choose your OpenVPN OVPN CA that you just created. Again, you can change type, algorithm, lifetime based on your liking. For the common name, go ahead and Google what you should actually put there for your production network. In this demo, I'm going to use just test.home.net. Country code, I use US. Everything else here should be filled out from our CA. Let me go back and take a look at that. CA, I didn't save the country code. So let me go and change that. Oh, can't change it. That's fine. I'm going to delete mine and recreate it very quickly. Add VPN CA, leave, skip, none, US. Okay, there we go. New York, Rochester, test, save. Okay, let's try that again. We'll go to certificates, add, sign, create an internal certificate, give it a descriptive name, OpenVPN server cert, that's what I'll get mine. Choose your OpenVPN CA that we created. Common name, there we go. Country code is showing up this time. Org unit, you don't need it. But we do need to change this. Certificate type, you will want to select server certificate. And then hit save. Okay, so we're done with certificates. Next we're going to be creating the LDAP. Excuse me, we're going to be filling in the LDAP information from JumpCloud's article here. It's essentially a copy and paste job, but you will need to get your org ID, which is in the JumpCloud settings for your organization. That is unique to your organization, so I'm not going to share mine here. And then I also want to bring up the UID. So you can use your administrative user ID to bind to LDAP if you'd like. I don't recommend that because if your administrative ID ever gets deactivated for some reason, anybody that's trying to authenticate with LDAP will say, hey, I need to communicate with LDAP. Your credentials make pfSense possible that user can connect to LDAP, JumpCloud's LDAP. So if your user credentials get blocked, it'll fail. So I recommend creating a specific user or a user specified for LDAP binding, which you will need to do in JumpCloud. I'm not going to go over the JumpCloud configuration side of things. It's very simple to do that. You need to create an LDAP server in JumpCloud, which is a click of a button, fill out maybe a couple boxes, and then you also need to bind at least one user to LDAP so that the authentication can work. So this is where I recommend making that specified user for LDAP binding, which is also a single checkbox on the user profile within JumpCloud. So yeah, we'll show you where to create this. You're going to go to System, User Manager, Authentication Servers, Add, and descriptive name, you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to choose JumpCloud LDAP. This is where you go back to the article and you just start copying and pasting things. I know some of this stuff's going to change. Peer certificate authority. For me, what I got it to work for me, and feel free to test these other CAs that we imported, but I choose the first certificate authority that I created, hence the one when I named it, when I imported it earlier. So make sure that you choose that certificate authority, otherwise you might have some trouble. Search scope, we will change that to entire, and this is again based on their documentation. We'll enable extended. We don't want to use anonymous, so we'll have those bind credentials. All right, username, this is going to be UID, group member, this is member of. The last thing that I'm going to uncheck is allow unauthenticated bind. So it doesn't mention that in their documentation here, but after reading some forum posts and other documentation on JumpCloud, it is recommended to uncheck allow authenticated bind. So make sure you fill out all of this information based on your particular org ID. I'm going to pause the video and I'll cut the video now, fill mine out, and we'll come back when I have mine filled in. Okay, great. So we have our JumpCloud LDAP server created. The next thing that we want to do before we get into creating the OpenVPN server and installing the client is we want to make sure that authentication works, so that you just went through putting all that information in from their documentation. Let's go ahead and test that by going to Diagnostics and Authentication. Choose your LDAP server that you just created. Go ahead and put in your JumpCloud username and password and click Test. Okay, you should get a green box indicating that you authenticated successfully. If you don't, go back and check the settings on your LDAP server. Make sure that you take a good look at this documentation that they provided, and maybe rewind the video, check it out. If you followed importing the certificates and creating them from earlier, you shouldn't have to redo any of that. You might just need to redo the LDAP portion of things, but we're good, so we're going to move on, and we're going to go ahead and create our OpenVPN server. So we'll head there. And I do want to bring up that I have a plugin, which is probably why you might look at this and say, hey, I don't have client export, what is that? It's a plugin that makes creating client configurations a lot easier, so you don't have to manually do it. You can get that by going to System, Package Manager, and then Available Packages. You would search for it. You would search for OpenVPN Client Export. Mine's already installed, so it's not going to show up in the Available Packages list, but go ahead and install that. Once you do have it installed, you can go back to VPN, OpenVPN, and then you'll see your client export option. But for creating the server, we're going to go to Wizards. For type of server, LDAP servers, we'll use the one that we created, which mine is named JumpCloud LDAP. For certificate authority, we want our OpenVPN authority that we created. And for certificate, we want our OpenVPN certificate that we created. Okay, next. So interface is going to be WAN. That's fine. Let's see. You'll have to give it a description. Mine says LDAP VPN test. I'm going to leave pretty much everything else default just for demo purposes, but you can mess with all the algorithms, etc. that you want. You will have to fill in a tunnel network, so make sure that this tunnel network doesn't overlap with any of your local area networks on either the machine that you're connecting from or the box that you're connecting to. So mine's outside that range. If we take a look at our diagram, we're going to be connecting from a 192.168.1 network and connecting to a 192.168.33 network. But when our OpenVPN client builds that tunnel interface, it's going to use a 172.16.33, which is what we're putting here. Local network is the other thing that you'll have to change. This is what networks you'll want access to. Again, looking at the diagram, that's the network that we're going to want to connect to. So if you have multiple networks that you want OpenVPN to work with, you would just comma separate them and type them in. For me, I only have one, so that's it. I'll scroll down and hit next. So you will want to enable both of these. You'll want to enable firewall rule and OpenVPN rule. These are going to create VPN rules, firewall rules for you, so you don't have to do it manually. Mine are already created, so I'm going to go ahead and uncheck those because I don't need duplicates, and I'll explain how that impacts my high availability setup in just a second. So pick next and finish. So showing you what those rules would have made, if I go to firewall rules, the bottom rule here for me is the destination is actually my CARP address for my high availability, so you don't need to change that. Yours probably says WAN, and that's okay. Unless you're working with high availability, then you're going to have to change a bit more, but that's not what this video is about. This is just about authenticating with OpenVPN to JumpCloud's LDAP as a service. The other rule that creates is a generic OpenVPN rule for our OpenVPN firewall setting here. So next we want to, what I need to do is I need to go back to my OpenVPN server and change one thing. This setting that I'm going to change is for my CARP address for my high availability, so you do not need to do this, but I'm going to modify mine, and where it says interface for me, it didn't have my CARP address available when creating the server, so I have to go in and change it afterwards. You don't have to do that. Again, this is just something that I need to do for high availability purposes. So next, we're going to go ahead and jump on our Windows box, and we'll do a client export, install OpenVPN, and test the connection. So here is my Windows box that I'm going to be communicating from. It's a 192.168.1.170. And I have the router UI open and available just to get that export file, the installable file, easier for me. So I'll go OpenVPN, client export. And the settings here that I do want to mention, make sure that your remote access server is the LDAP VPN one that you created. Host name resolution. You can leave yours on interface IP address. That's fine for you. For my setting, for the CARP setting that I have to change it and put in my CARP address, so that's a 10.10.1.49. Again, you can leave yours on interface IP address. I also want to bring this up for pfSense 2.5.0. There's a bug that happens for Windows clients. If you disconnect from the VPN server and try and connect too quickly, you won't be able to reconnect. So to get around that, you can check this box to use a random local port. There was a thread in the Netgate forums that I found this solution or workaround for. I think they have a bug open to try and fix that moving forward, or they might add like an additional setting here. But if your Windows clients are having trouble when they disconnect, if they try to reconnect too quickly and they're complaining that, hey, it's not able to connect, check this out. You might need to change their local random port or L port in the client config. It's going to be in the config L port 0 is what you would see. Alright, so I'll save this installer, current Windows installer, 64. The machine that I'm working on is a virtual machine. It has low resources, so it's going to take a second or two to open up. Okay, and we do want to run this. Alright, first step of this, it's going to install OpenVPN, the client, and then there's going to be a post-install script that will install the certificates and keys and config file. So we'll close, and the second part will pop up on its own. We'll click yes, install. Alright, config, certificate, and keys completed. We'll close. Okay, so now we have our OpenVPN GUI here. We'll double click on it. It's going to try and connect to our server, so we'll put in our JumpCloud credentials. Alright, and in a second we'll get a connection. Alright, so we're connected. So now The IP of the machine that I'm on right now is 192.168.1.170. The tunnel network, the IP that I got from that is 172.16.33.2. And now I can communicate with 192.168.33.1. Okay. Just to show you, when I disconnect, that I won't be able to communicate with that, we get a failure. So that's it. I hope you found this video helpful. Again, this is what I found that works for me. I was struggling with the certificates portion side of things and setting up the OpenVPN server correctly. So I hope this helps somebody else. If you have any comments or you found a better way to do this, feel free to share that information, make a video of your own, all that good stuff. All right, take care.